It's not a poetic phrase, it's a map. The man who understands this stops chasing what shines and starts regulating what vibrates. He doesn't beg for attention. He silently organizes the field where the woman's imagination works against her. Attraction isn't applause, it's measured disturbance, and the one who measures the disturbance commands the outcome. The modern illusion is childish. Men believe that female desire is born from words, compliments, and attention, as if romance were an app of instant reward. The more they talk, the less they say. The more they explain, the less they are worth. Desire, however, isn't born from excess. It's born from scarcity and uncertainty. What's rare unsettles. What's predictable numbs. What isn't immediately given awakens the body. And once the body awakens, the mind races to justify why. Imagination does the work that words never will. There's a pain men never confess. They seek emotional safety. One guarantees peace before the battle. But a woman biologically doesn't respond to peace. She responds to tension between control and risk. It's the friction between what could be and what isn't yet that lights the spark of interest. When you offer too much comfort, you offer anesthesia. When you offer a subtle outline of risk, not recklessness, but enigma, you offer life. Comfort dulls. Tension illuminates. Tension, when calibrated, doesn't wound, it sculpts. Machiavelli never wrote about seduction, but he wrote about human nature. And human nature doesn't change with hashtags. Men are driven more by the hope of gain than by the possession of it. The same law governs female desire. Desire lives in the almost, not in the having. The almost is investment. The almost is narrative. The almost is where the mind creates scenes, projects, meanings, multiplies sensations. When you give everything, you kill hope. When you suggest and sustain, you feed. Anticipation. The anxious man gives, the strategic man measures, and he who measures creates value. Jung called the shadow that which consciousness tries to deny, but the body recognizes. In the feminine unconscious, the archetype of the man who provokes yet doesn't yield awakens the part that longs to be challenged, tested, deciphered. He isn't the caricature of the playboy. He's the enigmatic presence that refuses to dilute his essence to be accepted. He appears whole and precisely because he doesn't dissolve. He forces her psyche to leave comfort and enter the game. The shadow moves when it meets a barrier. Desire grows when it meets a solid form. Liquid seeks the vessel. Energy seeks the contour. Without contour, it spills and is lost. The common man tries to convince. The anxious man tries to explain. The man who understands the game doesn't explain. He regulates. He creates a rhythm that alternates between intensity and pause, contact and silence, signal and denial of the signal. He allows her mind to work, lets uncertainty breed investment, lets absence be interpreted as message. He knows desire isn't a button, it's a field. And in that field, the rule is simple. Whoever sets the tension sets the hierarchy. And whoever sets the hierarchy harvests respect before pleasure. That's why the language of power isn't insistence, it's containment. The man who masters emotional tension awakens a woman's sexual side without touching her. Because he first touches what governs everything, the psychological. When the symbol changes, the body follows. When the rhythm changes, the response changes. When need goes quiet, presence dominates. And when presence dominates, the rest, glances, gestures, surrender becomes consequence. The game begins before the word. The game begins when you stop seeking safety and start emitting calibrated tension. The game begins when you understand that desire is power, and power before anything else is self-control. The invisible error. Men try to create connection when they should create tension. The modern man approaches a woman seeking warmth. He wants to be liked, to be accepted, to feel safe. But safety kills polarity, and polarity is the root of desire. Connection is the last stage of attraction, not the first. The more you try to create connection prematurely, the more you dissolve the mystery that could have generated it naturally. A man's mistake is believing that a woman falls in love with emotional comfort when in fact she falls for the dissonance between curiosity and control. The feminine unconscious doesn't respond to security, it responds to emotional gravity. A woman doesn't seek a man who gives her everything, she seeks one who makes her feel, and feeling isn't built through explanations, it's built through energy exchange. While the average man narrates his life, the strategic one creates presence. He doesn't fill silence with words, he stretches it until she begins to speak first. He lets the void work for him, and the more she speaks, the more she invests. The one who invests first is already being conquered. Machiavelli would say that men must either be caressed or annihilated. Translated to the dynamics of attraction. Don't be neutral. Neutrality is the death of tension. You don't awaken a woman's desire by being available. You awaken it by being unpredictable. Predictability is comfort, and comfort kills instinct. The emotional field of desire is governed by one simple law. She must always feel that she's earning something she could lose, not because you manipulate, but because you value what you give. Schopenhauer explained that the will governs before the intellect understands. In other words, attraction happens before logic can interfere. That's why rational conversation never creates sexual magnetism. It creates fraternity. It places you in the category of the safe, the nice, the harmless. But desire only appears in the presence of risk. The man who eliminates risk eliminates mystery. The man who eliminates mystery eliminates desire. The feminine psyche doesn't crave balance, it craves movement. Tension is the dance of the opposites: light and shadow, distance and proximity, affection and withdrawal. Remove one and you remove the pulse of attraction. The modern man sabotages himself by seeking validation instead of gravity. He wants to be loved for being good, not desired for being strong. But admiration doesn't awaken the body, polarity does. You can make a woman admire your discipline, your kindness, your effort, and still she won't feel attraction. Because admiration touches the mind, not the instinct. Attraction isn't gratitude, it's projection. It's born from what she imagines about you, not from what she knows. The more she imagines, the more she invests. And the more she invests, the more she desires. That's why connection is a consequence, not a strategy. Connection is born after tension has already proven value. A man who starts by connecting is like a general negotiating before drawing his sword. He'll be respected but never feared. And without fear, there's no desire. Every woman, consciously or not, measures emotional hierarchy in the first minutes of interaction. If you talk too much, you lose the lead. If you justify yourself, you give up the throne. The one who governs tension governs perception, and perception is the kingdom where desire is born. The mechanism of desire. A woman doesn't desire the man who gives her everything. She desires the one who withholds what she craves. Desire is born from contrast. It needs tension, friction, uncertainty. When something is fully offered, it loses symbolic weight. When something is withheld, it becomes sacred. That's why the men who try to prove themselves through excess always fail. Desire doesn't live in abundance, it lives in scarcity. The feminine psyche doesn't fall in love with logic, it falls into rhythm. It doesn't surrender to words, but to sensations. When you feel every silence, you leave no space for her imagination to move. And desire is a creature of imagination. The mind of a woman feeds on ambiguity. She needs gaps to project meaning. The less she knows, the more she interprets. And what is interpreted feels personal. It becomes real. Because the brain doesn't distinguish between what is experienced and what is vividly imagined. That's why the greatest seducers don't explain. They suggest. Machiavelli would have admired this strategy. He said, "Men are driven by two forces, fear and desire. A woman desires what she feels she can't fully possess, not because she wants control, but because she wants motion. Static admiration turns into boredom. Dynamic. Uncertainty turns into obsession. When a man becomes too accessible, he becomes a solved equation. But when his energy oscillates between closeness and detachment, She begins to invest in decoding him. And the more she tries to understand, the more she's already lost. Because in the game of desire, whoever tries to understand already surrendered. Jung wrote that the feminine shadow seeks a masculine presence capable of awakening her chaos without destroying her structure. The man who embodies calm intensity becomes that archetype. He's not the loud one, not the clown, not the charmer. He's the one whose silence carries meaning. He doesn't seduce through noise, but through gravity. He doesn't chase attention, he bends it around him. His absence becomes presence. His restraint becomes fuel. Because tension is nothing but restrained energy, and energy, when not released, transforms into fascination. A woman doesn't desire peace. She desires polarity, the emotional spark that arises when she senses dominance under control. The calm man who could explode but doesn't. The stable one who could devour but chooses to observe. That's the paradox of desire. Women crave the contained predator, not the desperate romantic. Because the predator doesn't seek approval. He emanates power. He doesn't need to prove. He allows himself to be felt. And what's felt but not claimed becomes magnetic. The common man wants to please. The powerful man provokes. He doesn't give reassurance. He gives rhythm. He leads the emotional tempo, shifting between approach and pause, attention and distance. He lets her imagination do half the work. He knows that the most seductive phrase is silence that comes after a glance, because silence, when charged with presence, speaks louder than words, and the body always listens to what the voice tries to hide. Desire, therefore, is not something you create. It's something you allow. You don't make her feel. You stop interrupting what she could feel. When you stop seeking validation, you emit authority. When you stop needing results, you project abundance. And abundance is the most sexual state a man can embody, because it says without words, I don't need to conquer, I attract. The woman doesn't fall for the one who chases. She falls for the one whose gravity pulls her in, the inversion of power. The one who needs to prove his worth becomes prey to the one who only needs to be. Desire isn't a game of words, it's a game of hierarchy. In every interaction, someone governs emotional rhythm, and the other adapts. Most men unknowingly allow the woman to take the lead by reacting to her instead of regulating her. They let her mood dictate the tone, her attention dictate their value, her silence dictate their anxiety, and whoever reacts first loses hierarchy. A woman doesn't fall for the man who seeks her approval, she falls for the one who doesn't depend on it, because detachment, when genuine, communicates abundance. It says, I choose, I don't chase. And every feminine instinct recognizes that energy as dominance. It's not arrogance, it's sovereignty. The man who acts from abundance doesn't compete. He decides. And the man who decides always controls the frame of desire. Machiavelli wrote that it's better to be feared than loved if one cannot be both. In the language of attraction, fear means respect. It's not about intimidation. It's about the sense of mystery and consequence that surrounds a man who doesn't bend easily. Women respect men who are not emotionally available on demand. They test limits to see if there's resistance. And when they find it, paradoxically, they relax because structure calms emotion and control breeds safety, not through words, but through energy. The inversion of power happens when the man stops trying to be liked and starts choosing what's worth his energy. He no longer seeks acceptance, he filters, he doesn't wait for validation, he observes reactions and calibrates presence. He doesn't respond immediately, he lets silence dictate rhythm. And that silence, intentional, firm, sovereign, does what no speech can do. It places him above the noise. Jung described the archetype of the self as the integration of shadow and light, total control of one's duality. In Seduction, this manifests as a man who knows his own darkness but doesn't flaunt it. He doesn't repress it either. He governs it. He understands that to awaken the feminine shadow, he must first have mastered his own, because a woman can only surrender to what she subconsciously respects, and she only respects what she can't fully domesticate. The average man seeking to be loved gives everything time, attention, validation, but giving without selection destroys value. The man of power gives little, but every gesture carries weight. A glance, a pause, a word, all intentional. Each act becomes symbolic because it's rare, and what's rare becomes sacred. That's why the inversion of power isn't about manipulation. It's about reestablishing hierarchy. The man doesn't withdraw to punish. He withdraws to preserve his gravity. He doesn't speak less to be mysterious. He speaks less because his silence already communicates enough. His attention isn't distributed, it's earned. And every woman, consciously or not, recognizes the same law that governs all attraction. The one who holds back controls the rhythm. The one who controls the rhythm governs the game, the conclusion. The woman doesn't surrender to words. She surrenders to the energy that lives behind them. Attraction is not communication, it's calibration. The more you talk, the more you weaken the signal. The more you explain, the more you dissolve the mystery. Because desire isn't about logic, it's about the emotional rhythm that your presence imposes. A woman doesn't fall for what she understands. She falls for what she feels but can't name, and what can't be named grows. The modern man obsessed with reassurance kills the very thing he seeks. He wants to be liked before being desired, accepted before being felt, understood before being respected. But the order of attraction is the opposite. First tension, then respect, then connection. The one who seeks emotional safety too soon ends up trapped in the comfort of being nice. And nice never awakens instinct because desire doesn't emerge from equality. It emerges from contrast. Machiavelli would say that all relationships are battles for influence. In the field of seduction, influence is invisible. It's not about dominance or submission, it's about rhythm. When you control rhythm, you control perception. And when you control perception, you command emotion. The man who governs emotion governs everything, even when he seems to be doing nothing. That's why true seduction isn't movement, it's gravity. Everything moves around the man who doesn't need to move. Jung described individuation as the process of becoming whole, integrating strength and vulnerability, reason and instinct, light and shadow. The seductive man is the one who no longer represses his instincts but channels them with presence. He doesn't fight his desire, he directs it. He doesn't escape his tension, he uses it as a bridge. He doesn't suppress his sexual energy, he refines it into calm power. Because desire without control is chaos, but control without desire is emptiness. The art lies in balance. The woman's sexual side isn't awakened by stimulation, it's awakened by permission. She allows herself to feel when she senses that the man before her is not afraid of feeling. When he no longer apologizes for his desire, his presence becomes liberating because the feminine doesn't open through pressure. It opens through polarity. And polarity is born the moment a man stops fearing his own instinct. He no longer hides it, nor flaunts it. He simply is. And that calm acceptance, that silent strength, that contained magnetism is what makes her body respond before her mind can interfere. Desire is not about conquest, it's about resonance. The more a man returns to his axis, the more his energy speaks for him. He doesn't seduce with effort. He seduces with alignment. He doesn't seek attention. He receives it naturally. Because the greatest paradox of seduction is this: when you stop trying to awaken desire, you become the reason it awakens.